Today's about a peaceful protest, but a powerful protest that's getting a political argument across. And today you're going to see tens and tens of thousands of decent people from Middle Britain on the march and on the move, telling the government they really need to start thinking again. I don't think we should be putting the focus on cuts. Let's put the focus on real recovery. We know what damage these cuts are going to do. Services of every sort, the Sure Start centres for children, home help services for the elderly. Real cuts are now taking place in services that really make a vital difference to people's lives.
I was on EMA when I was at school, and it made a massive difference to my life. I wouldn't have ended up at Cambridge University without it, to be honest.
What particularly is getting you out of bed?
Cuts to children's services. So all around King's Cross and Camden, they're cutting the Sure Start programmes, which have been really beneficial to my daughter and my son and I, and really saved our lives.
500,000 Britons filled the streets for most of the day Saturday in a trade union-organised rally to protest the biggest cuts in close to a century. As the day wore on, scuffles broke into violence as police moved in on protesters in Trafalgar Square. That predictably grabbed the headlines, such as they were in this country. But it would be sad to leave the story there. To fill us in, the New Statement's Laurie Penny joins us now from London. Laurie, welcome back to the program. First question, we've heard from you about a lot of student protests. How was this day, Saturday, different?
Well, the first obvious way it was different was that it wasn't just students involved in this protest. There were a lot of people from all walks of life involved, in the TUC march or the Union march, and in the protests that went on elsewhere in Oxford Circus, Piccadilly Circus, Trafalgar Square. All over London there were groups of people doing different kinds of protests. I think it's very, very sad that the media, by and large, has tried to paint it as, one big demonstration by the unions and another riot by, unaffiliated groups. When actually, there was a lot more overlap between all those different groups than people are saying.
What form did that overlap take? We're interested in the relationship between the labour movement and other organised groups and unorganised groups, just people showing up to protest. Does the way that Saturday happened suggest some new alliances, some new coalitions maybe?
That's the hope among some people. I mean, mainly the people who were running around in black and in masks have been called anarchists and dismissed by the press as violent thugs. But actually, a lot of the people wearing masks that day and, throwing paint bombs at shops, and they were specifically targeted shops, not just any old shops. There were shops that were avoiding tax in the UK and banks who've been seen to, sell out the system in this country. A lot of the young people doing that hadn't done anything like that before, but they felt maybe that the march that was being undertaken by the unions might not be sufficient to make the real rage of young people felt.
So what did happen outside of the union march? What happened, as you describe, in Piccadilly and Oxford Circus and Trafalgar Square? You were there.
Well, what happened is that a group called UK Uncut organised a big occupation for 3:30 p.m. leaving from Oxford Circus, and lots of little occupations of shops and banks. And a lot of people, mainly young people under 30, came off the main march and came to join that protest from 2 till 3:30. Now at 3:30, UK Uncut moved down to their big target, which was Fortnum and Mason's, the Royal Bracers down on Piccadilly, moved from Oxford Circus, where a lot of shops were vandalised. And a lot of young people who were unaffiliated joined that march, and it turned a little bit chaotic. The occupation of Fortnum and Mason's went off as planned. I think most UK Uncut people will probably agree that it went off better than planned inside. There was a hugely peaceful protest. Nothing was stolen or damaged. The staff were very, very friendly. Outside there were slogans scrawled on the building by other people. Inside it was all very, very civilised and very peaceful. But outside, thousands of people who didn't make it into the building decided to do some more smashing up of banks, and the police moved in very, very heavily. There were a lot of fights in the street outside. And then all the protesters inside the building, most of whom were UK Uncut, were targeted by the police. They were told they wouldn't be arrested, but when they were allowed to leave the building, because they were trapped inside the building, when they were allowed to leave, they were all arrested and taken to different holding cells.
Now, how did they target the targets that they identified? You said they were carefully targeted, the banks, the shops, Fortnum & Mason, the Queen's grocers, as you described them. What have they done wrong in the eyes of UK Uncut?
This is because Fortnum & Mason, like many other companies in the UK, is believed to be avoiding tax that it should be paying. Avoiding tax that it should be paying in the UK, and depriving the taxpayer and the state of funds that it owes and not paying its fair way. Obviously, there is also a class element in that Fortnum & Mason's is an extremely upmarket shop where a lot of very, very rich people shop. And I think the point was being made also that there are a lot of people in this country who feel that there is a very, very specific, clear and unfair class divide going on, and that really there's a class war starting in this country again. And that element was unspoken. It's not a line being officially peddled by UK Uncut, but that's a message that I think many people have taken from the day.
Now, you made the point in some of your writing about this that the police themselves are targets of some of these cuts as public workers. In Wisconsin, we saw police and fire people who actually were accepted from the cuts that were being challenged, that were being proposed, nonetheless siding with the potential targets, other public workers. Is there any possibility that that might happen down the road in the UK?
I'm not sure. Well, a lot of police yesterday, apparently while they were taking the UK Uncut members off to be arrested, they were complaining about their cuts to their jobs and their overtime. I'm not sure if that would happen here in the UK. I think a lot of people hope that it might, but it's very, very early to say. I mean, later on in Trafalgar Square, when a lot of people came in to join a peaceful party that was planned, a debrief, people were having a little bit of, supermarket wine and cigarettes and biscuits and just sort of chilling out, basically, after a long and confusing day. Then there was a little scuffle, started when the police tried to arrest someone at random. And about 100 riot cops moved in and started beating people, and there was a very, very big showdown in which there was a lot of police brutality that I observed. And it really, really seemed like the police had an agenda that day. To me, that's what it seemed like.
Now, that was 500,000 people turning out before these cuts even happened and finding themselves up against what you've described. What is planned next as these cuts actually go into effect at the beginning of this coming month?
The government has already said, the British government, that it's not going to be making any changes to its proposed plan of public sector cuts. And those cuts they're starting to hit home already. People are losing their jobs. Cuts are biting down across the country. People, disabled people and people on welfare are going to be finding life a lot harder over the next few months. And really, nobody knows what's going to happen. There may well be an escalation of political activity in this country. It's very, very early to say so. But a lot of people, particularly young people, have been radicalised by what's happened over the last few months, by the police brutality they've experienced. And really yesterday, it's probably going to lead to even more radicalisation in that vein.
Yes. Penny, thanks so much. Laurie Penny is a writer for the New Statesman. She tweets as Penny Red and reports regularly here for GRITtv. Thanks so much for joining us again.
We're facing a period of deep insecurity, energy insecurity, climate insecurity, and of course jobs insecurity. And the government says, we can't afford to deal with those. But we can afford to find £1 trillion to bail out the banks. So it's like saying we can't afford to survive.
It feels like it's like a knee-jerk reaction to a problem, and it hasn't been well thought out.
It's estimated that about 25 billion a year is lost to corporate tax avoidance.
Very few people would welcome cuts, and it's not something that anyone wants. There is, broadly speaking, a consensus in government that there is a need for cuts. The question is, what do you cut, and how do you do it in a way that doesn't remove basic services for people?
My name's Ricky Jones. I've spent 25 years working in education in Hackney. The youth service in Hackney has been slashed. Slashed not in half, but into a quarter. And what does that do? That makes our children end up on the streets.
We've occupied West Street because we're protesting against the cuts in Hackney. Hackney is one of the poorest boroughs in the country, and they're going to be making cuts, which is ridiculous. Stuff happens in these areas because it's poor. Like, you don't get Stubbins and you don't get Robbins in Muswell Hill or Highgate. Like, cutting youth centres, cutting nurses, cutting schools and places like this is just going to destroy. People are going to have to pay so much more because of the cuts. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Looking at the smaller picture, we're seeing lots of false economies. For instance, if a health promotion programme is cut and this leads to people needing more serious health care later on, then that, in a very literal way, is a false economy. If the government then pursues policies that are going to continue to dampen the economy, which is what they're doing by cutting spending and putting more people out on the dole, it makes the situation worse. They may be making cuts, but we're also cutting the amount of money coming into the state at the same time. So that's why it's a false economy.
I mean, I agree that, you know, there's a hole and you've got to be financially responsible. Well, I think we're all agreed on that. I think what's interesting about the movement is that people are actually talking about this and engaging and saying, well, actually there is a way forward.
There wouldn't be a need for any cuts. UK Uncut is focusing on the fact that there are alternatives. The amount that Vodafone avoided was estimated around 6 billion. That's enough money to prevent any of the cuts to any of the local authorities all across the country happening. We're calling to the government to crack down on these loopholes and stop letting these big businesses off tax that they should be paying.
If you can foster the positive side of it, your actual movement is so much stronger.
Basically, I'm here, not just for me, but for everyone.
We need to make it clear that we want change.
If we all come together, if enough of us get involved, we really can stop bad things happening, make good things happen instead.
It's achievable, you simply have to do it. If it's complicated, so what?
If you don't fight for yourself, you can't expect anyone else to do it for you.
Enjoy GRITtv? Want more people to see it? Well, we are making our show available free to public television stations. We need your help to express your opinion. If you'd like to see the show where you live on public television, call your local station and ask for GRITtv with Laurie Flanders.